Welcome back to Apollo Art Analysis. This episode, we're going to be checking out a piece by the established photographer known as Melissa H. This episode, we're going to be talking about this kind of visual energy here. We're going to talk about the kind of isolation of the candid perspective, and we're also going to talk about the medium of photography. So let's jump right into it. So whenever you first see this work, you're met with kind of a lone subject here, really in a blur passing by. It certainly catches the eye. Of course, we have this small bit of framing, kind of an island of that black silhouette against the kind of whiter background there. So it certainly catches the eye and it kind of zooms by as you kind of scroll by. And so we do see a subject set in center. Of course, it's not perfectly defined. It is quite blurry. We'll talk a bit about that motion here in a second, but when an element is placed in the center, it's always going to draw your eye. It almost feels like everything revolves around that center subject. And so it is accented, like we said, that kind of dark on light contrast, that kind of blurred out silhouette certainly pops out against that white neutral backing. And so in the realm of color, there's not too much going on in the work at hand. We certainly have that gray black, we have that kind of small bit of red, and then the white. So the two main foundations we see is that kind of black gray and that white as well, and then it of course collides with the red. So we see a bit of red here, and we see much more of that red in that streak in the middle. So all in all, it does catch the eye, and it also brings us into the center as well, that little bit of red. So all very important with this work. And so the mood that results from the spatial composition is really dark, right? You have this kind of black and red, and you just have that hazy light. Even the texture within the work at hand, this kind of haze effect over the composition, all really affects that mood quite well. And so, like I said, we have this placement, not necessarily intentional placement, but the photo was taken with the subject kind of here in the center. And so the placement, our eye is certainly drawn to the middle, and it does feel like it's framed as well. We have this kind of door frame, if you will, not door, but entry frame, but that does frame our subject in the center. That does also accent and emphasize the visual impact of form. So all very important when we're looking at this work. And so you'll see, of course, the blur, it feels an incredible sense of motion. I would say implied motion, but it is literal motion. This is kind of a candid shot. They're kind of flying by, and you have to get this right quick. So that does create an immense amount of energy. Of course, you have that blur. Feels like it's stretching away. I appear they're going this way. It's hard to say for sure, but that blur does invigorate the spatial composition alongside that kind of misty haze. There is quite a bit of visual energy within the work at hand, but most of it, of course, is concentrated there in the middle, so all very important. And so it's quite hard to time this, right? The subject was likely taking pictures of people going by and probably took dozens and dozens, and probably this was one of the ones that we were able to see. So there is a good amount of timing to that, right? You have to time it perfectly. There's probably a lot of photos of this similar nature that we're not going to be able to see because maybe they're slightly to the right, maybe they're slightly to the left, or maybe they're not blurred out. So the subject or the photographer does a really good job of kind of curating this work for sure. And like I said, it is kind of a candid perspective. We don't know who exactly this is, although our eye is certainly drawn there. And our eye is also certainly drawn to that red. We talked a little bit about that. It's kind of caught there just for a second, right before the subject kind of zooms by. And so with this in mind, and so we see a lone subject here, like I said, and we don't know who or what this subject is. We don't know if the subject is looking at us, although it does appear to be kind of zooming by and trying to leave away. And so with this in mind, especially in, say, big cities, for example, we don't know this is a big city or not, but in big cities, there is this sense of kind of, not knowing the people around you, but also not really kind of wanting to, if you know what I mean. If you're in a really big city, there's so many people around you, you don't have time to meet everyone. You just keep going. So I kind of see this within the work at hand. There is this kind of lonely, there is this kind of isolation. We don't know who or what this subject is. So with that in mind, it feels quite anonymous, right? We don't know if we will ever see this subject again. So the title of this work is Ghost Writer. So there is a writer. It does appear to be a ghost. Of course, you have that motion blur, but also ghost in the sense that we don't know who or what they are. There is no definition. There is no name. There is no face. We can't attach it to anything. All we have is this kind of ghostly blur that just flashes by and kind of leaves away. So, with that in mind, kind of flashes by, slips into the night, and likely we will never see this subject again. So really nice work. This is a piece of photography. So photographer created this with a camera, probably a little bit of post editing. I'm not exactly sure. This kind of hazy effect does kind of feel like that. It could be the impact of both motion, a little bit of exposure, and maybe even the weather as well. So there's a lot of things you could certainly draw here, but photography, I think it's incredibly underrated. Of course, all these people have cameras right in their back pockets, right? And these are very good cameras as well. So anyone can be a photographer. Just kind of work on your composition, kind of rule of thirds and all that, and you're going to do quite well. So hope y'all enjoyed today. If you guys did, go check out the original artist, Melissa H., the photographer, always doing some really good stuff. This one certainly caught my eye, and I knew I had to at least investigate a little bit deeper. So I hope we did that today. We talked about motion blur, this kind of hazy effect, the visual energy. We talked about kind of candid perspective, the loneliness, isolation, photography, so many different things that we went into today. So I hope y'all enjoyed. Go check out the original artist, always doing some good stuff. My name is Apollo. This was Apollo Art Analysis, and I'll see y'all on the next episode. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to support our work directly, please check out our Apollo community tokens. Apollo Art Exchange is an ecosystem of art appreciation which elevates artists each and every day. Thanks for listening.